All right, we're live. Little off-season cram session, if you will. Texans' potential strategies in regards to free agency, draft, running back, which is a polarizing topic around draft time. People hate running backs. Maybe that's going to change, but it is the Locker Room, number one source for daily Texans digital content. I'm Landry Locker. Subscribe, like. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610. Going to bring in old John Crumpler, who I think does some of the best Texans work. I would put it against any major outlet as far as having substance. I would put his instincts of the organization, the franchise, as well as just his overall efforts to localize everything. I put it against most. So we'll have John Crumpler in a sec. But before that, let's kind of talk about what's happened in the offseason and how things are shaping up heading into free agency. Obviously, the coaching hire was a big thing, the D'Amico Ryans thing. A lot of people were excited about that. And then all attention kind of shifted on the staff, to the staff, I should say, and then it shifted to what happened in Indianapolis, where I think the Colts and the Texans are going to be linked in multiple ways with the head coach, given the fact that Shane Steichen was a popular choice around here and given the fact that they made that decision. And now the quarterback stuff, Irsay Gate, as they call it, is going on. Let's bring in old Crumpler. John, how you doing, my friend? Was just talking about how I would put your Texans writing against any major outlet, and I like the way you always like to localize it, so I'm happy to have you here, man.
Hey, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I'm excited to be on the show. I'll be honest, definitely watch you while I'm studying sometimes, and I'm excited to talk some Texans. It's shaping up to be a very good offseason. Oh.
There you go, Crumpy.
Am I muted?
Yeah, you're still muted, Crump. Should be good. Don't know what's going on here. We'll figure it out. But we got some questions. Load them up in the line. Can't hear Crump right now, but we'll get him. He sounds excited. He'll be back. Yeah, I want to focus on what has gone down with Shane Steichen, and specifically what he said the traits were that he valued in a quarterback. He said he had 3, and I'm just wondering who exactly this would be.
Yeah, I think accuracy, decision-making, and the ability to create are the 3 things that I look at in a quarterback. But obviously above the neck, I think that, the players that I've been around, Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert and Phillip Rivers, they all have one thing in common. They're obsessed with their craft. And if you can find that in a quarterback, you're probably going to have some success.
All right, here we go. Crumpler is in now. John, what's up, man? I guess we're just having a little problem.
Can you hear me this time?
Yeah, good to go. Go ahead, man.
Awesome. I just wanted to say, man, by the way, I love what you said about my writing. Really appreciate it. I'm excited to be on the show. Definitely watch while I'm studying, and excited to talk Texans. It's going to be a eventful offseason, as I think we're already seeing just 3 weeks into it now. So but yeah, what have I missed while I was working on my technical difficulties? And now I can't hear you.
All right, now we got it. All right, Crumpler, you got me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you. I could not hear you previously.
Why do you like Bryce Young for a fit with the Texans, specifically with this system?
Okay, so, Bryce Young's been my QB1 for, heck, a year now, since I saw him really for the first time in Alabama in 2021. Let's talk. I guess it starts with offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, and he's really bringing Kyle Shanahan's West Coast scheme. It's going to be a scheme that's predicated on winning with the run, with the zone gaps, and then the passing game is going to be a quick, rhythmic one where the quarterback's tasked with knowing exactly where the ball is going to go and getting it there. And for Bryce Young, I really think there's two quarterbacks that fit. It's either CJ Stroud or Bryce. And the reason I like Bryce over CJ Stroud is I think what we saw at Alabama is Bryce is he sees the field very well. He's a pinpoint accurate passer. And so he can do that point guard stuff, but he brings this additional aspect of he can extend the play. And the quarterbacks that we're watching win in today's NFL, I think they can all extend in that manner. They can make something out of nothing. What we've watched with Kyle Shanahan do in San Francisco, it's a very difficult needle to thread where everything has to be perfect. And he doesn't really like when his quarterbacks go off script. And I think we've seen in some of his biggest games, when we talk about the Super Bowl and Jimmy G missing that last deep shot, and not being able to really extend off of that. When we talk about, I mean, it doesn't really feel fair to criticize this past season because they got down to their fourth string quarterback. But I think Bryce can do all the point guard things that you want in the West Coast, and he can extend. And he's not doing it in a, this isn't Kyler Murray. This isn't someone who's running to run. This isn't someone who thinks they're the best athlete on the field. No, he's going to work with Salk and want to do everything in his system. He's a passer, but he can do a little more than what I think Stroud has at least shown that he wants to do. So for me, that's why Bryce Young is my top quarterback for Houston.
And I look at the Indianapolis Colts and I listened to what they said yesterday. We had Kevin Bowen on. He doesn't believe that Irsay was lying. He thinks Irsay was just speaking out loud and that Irsay might actually like Bryce Young and that the other guys might like somebody else. So like I thought immediately, like, can you really take Irsay at what he said? But he joined us yesterday on Sports Radio 610, and he actually thinks, and this was Kevin Bowen, he actually thinks Jim Irsay was thinking out loud and talking out loud, which, as we know, he's been known to do.
I mean, if any owner in the NFL would talk off the cuff about the quarterback prospects without talking to his social team or his coaching staff or anyone he's going to be working with on the press conference, it would be Irsay. So do I believe that Irsay genuinely likes Bryce Young? Of course. I mean, Young's been on a lot of national stages. He was the reigning Heisman winner. I think he brings the most buzz in this class, and for fair reason, whether it's his stature, whether it's the program he played for, whether it's the accolades. But do I think that Bryce Young is actually a quarterback that I would expect Shane Steichen and especially general manager Chris Ballard to target? No. So, I mean, an interesting dynamic to watch this offseason. But when you watch people or read people who cover the Indianapolis Colts, he just does not seem to fit the profile that Indianapolis chases with building their team. So do I believe Irsay? Absolutely. Do I think it's really going to factor into their plans? I'm not quite sold on that.
Let's talk about the running backs. You brought something up the other day that was kind of polarizing on Twitter. You brought up the possibility of taking Bijan Robinson, and it wasn't even at 12. You brought up taking Bijan Robinson potentially at 33, which is, I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. I would actually consider it at 12. I don't understand. Like, I feel like we've gotten to a point where with running backs, people almost like undervalue them so much. And that's part of the reason why these guys fall, is because there's been a mindset that these guys, you can find them anywhere, and you hear all these examples. But I think even within those examples, there's like an example of teams valuing running backs and using assets. There's just so many of them play. So you're going to have like specific examples of guys doing it. But if you just look at the top 8 leading rushing running backs in the NFL last year, like the average draft position of them was 29. So they were all, I think it was 5 second-round picks, 3 first-round picks. The ADP was 29. And the guys are cheap. They make the biggest impact immediately. If you need to have a lot of them. Where do you sit on the Bijan Robinson thing and potentially drafting Bijan Robinson? Let's even say at 12. Let's even say, like, try to make a case for drafting Bijan Robinson at 12. Or if you don't believe that, then where would it be appropriate for this team to get another back?
So if I was trying to sell someone at taking Bijan Robinson at 12, which I would be with you, I don't think it's the most ridiculous idea. I personally think that the value of wide receiver and how expensive they are on the open market kind of means that you should look at that position at the top of the first round over running back. But if I was going to make the argument, I would say Bijan Robinson is a better football player than any receiver in this class. If you look at, I believe, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, he put out his top 100 players for this class. He had Bijan Robinson at 6. The first wide receiver came in at 20. And I do think the gap is that big between what Robinson does and what any of the receivers in this class really offer. And the next thing I'd say is Robinson kind of transcends the running back position with some of the things that he do. So we all know that he can break tackles, that he has excellent vision. He finds lanes, just the ways that he scores, sometimes in ridiculous fashion for Texas. But I would just talk about what he can do in the passing game and the different ways you can line him up. I put this out, the 49ers in 2021, they ran more 21 personnel, so 2 backs on the field with 1 tight end. And a lot of the times that is with a fullback, but I think that Robinson's skill set's one where you could feasibly put him on the field with Dameon Pierce if you want to get all your best guys out there, where you can motion Robinson out to the slot and he can beat a corner on a slant route. Or if you get him in the flat, he's going to break a tackle and go. He has that kind of gravity where the defense has to know where that guy is, because he'll beat you more than anyone else on the Texans right now. He would instantly be the Texans' best player. And for me, that's where the argument would come in. Now, where is it okay to take him? If he gets to 33, for me, that would say that's a cheat code for my offense to be a little better than it should be almost immediately. People say there's too many holes on the Texans. I would say he covers up those holes. Just take the football player he breaks rules on defenses. He puts linebackers in hell. Creates a lot of confusion at the second level. So I would say 12 might be a little rich, but if you trade back into the end of the first round or at the top of the second, I mean, we both watched him a lot at Texas. It's a guy who can change how you want to play offense.
Also, when you have picks of luxury, like the Jacksonville, they had James Robinson he was 5th in the league in rushing, and they used the extra first round pick and they drafted Travis Etienne. I don't think they regret it at the moment. So when you have extra picks and you have that luxury, you can do it. And we've also seen like all the talk about like Elijah Mitchell and all that. San Francisco, the Elijah Mitchell story from D'Amico Ryans, to me, it was interesting because they drafted Trey Sermon actually the day before. Like they drafted Trey Sermon in the 3rd round. It didn't work out. They drafted Elijah Mitchell. And even last year with limited draft equity, with Elijah Mitchell coming back from injury, they still traded half a draft for Christian McCaffrey. They traded a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round pick. So they valued the running back position.
Yeah, and when they got Christian McCaffrey, we saw that changed everything. When the Jacksonville Jaguars got Travis Etienne, that changed how their offense was working with James Robinson. The guys that can catch the ball in this game, like you're saying, they're worth every penny, and good teams are chasing them for good reason, I would say.
The other thing too is I don't think Dameon Pierce, like for how much we love Dameon Pierce, and I think Dameon Pierce is a hell of a player. I don't think Dameon Pierce is a guy that you can rely on to carry the full workload over the course of an entire season. Like he could have played more last year. He would have missed a couple of games, but you give him 220 carries through 13 weeks. Yes, he would have been an offensive rookie of the year candidate if you look at that over the course of an entire season, but he only had 329 carries in 4 years at Florida. Last year, you give it to him 220. I don't think Dameon Pierce is a guy that you hand the ball to 20 times over the course of a season. I don't think it's good for him. I don't think it's good for them. You've got to get guys that can do multiple stuff. You've got to get multi-skilled running backs. So the Bijan Robinson, whether it's Gibbs, whether it's A-Chain, there's a lot of guys that in this draft, especially at running back, that you can significantly improve your team. But I'm with you on the wide receiver thing. Like you're going to have to find some wide receivers, especially with what the price of those guys is, and especially given the fact that you're going to have to get rid of Cooks. How do you look at the wide receiver? Like if people tell you that Jackson Smith-Njigba is a slot guy, and some will say, well, you got John Mechie. I don't think you draft assuming that John Mechie is going to be able to hold down the slot. If you get too many guys that can line up one place, just have Bobby Slowik get more creative and figure some stuff out.
Wait, Landry, before we go to wide receivers, I had an interesting conversation yesterday with DJ kind of about the Bijan thing, and I wanted to ask you this. Where would you rank Dameon Pierce amongst the NFL running backs right now? How would he be? Is he a top 10 NFL running back today?
I would probably rank Dameon Pierce as like a top 12 running back, maybe top 15.
I think that DJ to me was trying to make the argument he's a top 5 back, which was a bit rich for me. But even if Pierce is top 12, I agree with you. You need a lot of running backs in this offense. It wouldn't stop me from taking Bijan just because the skill set is different. And it's a guy who, like you said, never taken on that extended workload. When we talk about the receiver class, I do think you run into some issues. Smith-Njigba, definitely more of a slot guy. At least that's where he was in Ohio State. But when I watch that, I say how much of that is a factor that, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson were on either side of him. And in most college programs, he's not having to go in the slot. Like, he's going to be put out wide more because they don't have the talent to so comfortably say, we're only going to put you here. And then he just won after the catch all the time. I would have no problem taking him. Jordan Addison, kind of a guy whose volume was a bit inflated with how much Kenny Pickett wanted to follow him at Pittsburgh, but still put up great numbers with Caleb Williams. And his traits, which is just he runs really crisp routes. He finds ways to get open. He has great hands. I think those are things that translate to the next level. I would kind of want to ask you this because I do not watch a lot of Big 12 football. How do you feel about Quentin Johnson?
I'm not as big on Quentin Johnston as a lot of guys are. Look, he had a good season. I do want to see. He's one of those guys I want to see what he runs, but I'm not as big on Quentin Johnston as a lot of guys. I like. Obviously, he played pretty well. He's a Texas decommit, which kind of sucked. But I'm not as big on Quentin Johnston. I like Addison better. I like Smith-Njigba, and I like some of the guys that you can get in day 2. The receiver run's going to be interesting this year because last year it was really early. I could see like a really big receiver run at the end of the first, maybe the start of the second. I'm not a Quentin Johnston guy, and I know that I said, I wouldn't let Mechie dictate how I drafted, someone that played in the slot. I could see Nico Collins. I don't think Nico Collins is going to be great. There's some good stuff, but we don't know what to do. We don't know what Nico Collins is going to be. But I do think that Nico Collins, he works his ass off, and maybe he could be like the Jennings in San Francisco, where you ask him to do a little dirty work, opens up and makes some type of plays. And it's always dangerous when you start comparing these guys because then all of a sudden you're like trying to like figure out who the hell is Kyle Juszczyk and who's this guy, who's that guy, and you just kind of. But I do think he could be the guy that takes advantage of opportunities when they're there. I just don't think Johnston's going to be. I don't think Johnston's going to be a wide receiver 1. I think Johnston's going to be like a, at best a 2 type of 3. I think he's going to be similar to Nico Collins. So Johnston doesn't really excite me.
Yeah, I'm just confused with how he won. It looks like he won on a lot of vertical routes, a lot of bullying, subpar secondary play in the Big 12, and to kind of go back, I do think there's going to be some good talent available when we get into that second round, into the third. My question is just, during the Bijan Robinson discussion, we talk about, is the NFL too undervaluing the running back position? And we're kind of see year after year, it's pushing those top guys down the board. I mean, even Najee Harris, who I think was better than anyone in last year's class, he ended up going just 20th. And previously, I think that's a guy you would have talked about in the top 10. But on the other side of that, with wide receiver, with how expensive the top of the market's getting, you look at what a guy like Devontae Adams just got, what Stephon Diggs was paid, what A.J. Brown signed for when he was traded to Philadelphia. I think wide receivers are going to kind of be artificially pushed up just because if you can get someone that you're 80% confident has a shot at being a number 1, or you're at least pretty confident he's a number 2, having that on 5-year team control is really valuable. So the peril of the Texans wait is, if there is that run, are you going to miss out? Like, what do you do if Quentin Johnson, Addison, Smith-Njigba, Hyatt, and Flowers are off the board when you get to 33 and your receiver room's in a lot of trouble? I think we would both assume Brandon Cooks is not going to be on the team next year. And, a lot of people want to argue that Davis Mills could be the starter. You can't, that same when I say you can't do that, I would say the same about Nico Collins cannot be your number 1 receiver again going into a season. So, they're in a weird spot because the receiver value doesn't match 12, but if you wait, you could be in some real trouble.
Yeah, the Davis Mills thing's interesting to me because I'm very against it, obviously, for obvious reasons. But when you start talking about like veteran quarterbacks and you start talking, about like if they were to get in the veteran market, I don't think Davis Mills would be the worst option, which sounds crazy. And the optimistic outlook on Davis Mills for me, and I don't know that and I think this might even be too rich at this point, is Daniel Jones. Like there's like some sort of like Daniel Jones resurrection where you go from being one of the worst offenses in the league and then you're like top half and you still don't know what the hell to do with Daniel Jones. But the quarterback position is going to be, I mean, that's obviously where all the attention is going to be. Do you think that there's a situation where they like this guy so much and then they like the next quarterback, let's say, is like number 9 or something on their board, and they don't feel like they're in a position to where they're so desperate for a quarterback that, and we talked about this on the show today, they're not so desperate that they want to take him at 2. Maybe they take Carter or Anderson, and then they maybe try to trade up from 12 to get a quarterback. Like, could we find ourselves in that situation, or are we in just such a desperate, like, find a quarterback thing? Because it's really kind of a dangerous place to be when you just assume, well, there's no drop off from 1 to 2, depending on what they think. That's the problem I have, because I'll go back to 98. I've been mentioning the Cardinals traded 2 firsts and a second to move from 3 to 2 because they just said, well, if Indianapolis drafts Ryan Leaf, we'll take Peyton Manning. If they draft Peyton Manning, we'll take Ryan Leaf. And it didn't work out. And I'm sure the Jets thought, well, we're going to get the second best guy and we're going to be okay. Didn't work out. So like this assumption that, well, we're going to get this quarterback if it doesn't go. It's kind of a dangerous game to play. Now, if you do everything the right way, like the Jets have done, then you can still build a squad. Or if you're like the Eagles and you make the Wentz move and you're doing everything right, you can still figure it out. But I'm not in the, maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment with the DeMeco situation where I just think, okay, I kind of trust them to make a tough decision and I trust the process. So if they decide not to take a quarterback, it might not be the worst thing for me. Or maybe it's just because I'm just such a Bryce Young guy that I just don't see myself wanting to use the number 2 pick on anyone else, which, look, quarterback makes all of us look dumb. So there's a chance that I look like an idiot. CJ Stroud's awesome. And you pulling tape of me talking about Bryce Young looking like an idiot. So could happen.
I mean, I think a lot of us on the Bryce QB1 hill are going to look that way if he doesn't pan out. But I mean, the real problem is the team's going to find themselves in a pretty perilous position. So we'll have free agency in March. You would assume that all the guys that you're comfortable starting, which would be like Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe you can throw Jacoby Brissett in that category. They're going to be gone. And so you get to April, and if you wait until draft day and your top quarterback, really the only guy that you're comfortable taking, is gone, I think you're in a really awkward position, because if you don't take your number 2 guy there, no assumption he makes it past the Raiders, past the Panthers, unless you've already talked about a deal. And when I look at the draft history of Nick Caserio, and I know people hate this, but Nick has been extremely aggressive to go get guys that he likes. I mean, look what he traded for Nico Collins during his first draft. Look at what we gave up to go get John Mechie last year. We moved up for Christian Harris. Nick, they clearly prioritize players that they like. And especially when you talk about this draft, they have 12 picks. They cannot make 12 picks. They've got a bunch of draft picks next year. I would not be surprised if, you talk about a situation where they have a quarterback who's the number 1 guy on their board and the next quarterback isn't until 10 or 11, that they say, I mean, let's go get him. Because if this pick doesn't work, I'll ask you this. Do you think Nick Caserio could survive missing on this quarterback unless he hit every other pick? If he misses on the quarterback at 2 or 1?
See, I would have said that Joe Douglas couldn't, but he kind of has, like he kind of has with the Zach Wilson thing. So I want to say yes. I'll also say this though. And I think this is the most important thing for Nick Caserio. And this is just kind of where he is. It's DeMeco's franchise. So they seem to be a pretty good mix. They seem to be a pretty good match. So I think it's just going to depend on if DeMeco wants to work with Caserio, if DeMeco thinks he is the right guy. So I would say maybe, but how bad does it look? Like, are we talking like Jamarcus Russell, Zach Wilson type?
Let's say it's Zach Wilson bad at number 2.
Depends how he drafts the other guys, and it depends how they look. And I think at the end of the day, it's just going to depend on DeMeco and how DeMeco looks. And how DeMeco looks at him.
Because I would say that Joe Douglas for the Jets, he basically has hit on every other pick, and that's why he's
done everything right. He's literally It's loaded in that, but it's an interesting thing because you can say they've survived, but you can also say, well, if they had Trevor Lawrence, we might be talking about the Jets as Super Bowl champs right now. So it's kind of like neither. Like, do you think Saleh, if the Jets don't make the playoffs this year, Saleh good?
I guess it depends how it happens, right? That's kind of, how bad is it? Is there some crazy injury? I would think he's good. They're trending in the right direction. It would be hard to see them bottoming out, but you're right. And I guess the reason I asked that, if we're asking that about Saleh, is I think that the success of DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio will largely be tied to, if they're going to take a quarterback in this draft, the success of that guy. They need to hit on this. So if they're demonstrably more confident that one of these quarterbacks is better than the other one, I think they'll go do it, because what's a second round draft pick? If they have to give up 33 and let's say a 2024 third, what's the difference between that and hitting on your quarterback versus having those two picks and you wasted this investment at second overall? So for me, I wouldn't be surprised to do it, because otherwise in 2 years, we could be at this same Robert Saleh Jets junction where we think DeMeco is a great defensive coach. We think that, thank you, Ronald. I'm glad I came off as older. I like that.
That's good, dude.
If you end up like the Jets and your roster's great, the coaching's great, but you're not winning enough games because of the quarterback, you're in trouble. So while they're here, I would think they'll make the investment if they think there's that guy. And, we don't know how those quarterbacks are ranked in the room. So it's going to be interesting to watch, because I imagine we'll know by mid-March exactly what they're thinking based on either trading up, letting another team trade up, or if they sign a free agent. That's going to tell us a lot too.
I think they're going to love Bryce Young. I just don't. I don't believe that. I don't see anything other than them loving Bryce Young. I just don't. I actually think Nick Caserio might like the little traits. I think he might get like some hoop dreams because he's kind of like a small quarterback himself. The makeup, I don't think is gonna phase him. And I was actually I talked to Caserio before the press conference, and I was just kind of asking him about bowl games, like players skipping bowl games and stuff, and he acted like there wasn't, like, he didn't put much stock into it. But I think Bryce Young playing in that bowl game is something that is pretty admirable, that they like, on top of the obvious. And I think DeMeco's an Alabama guy, so he might like him. I do wonder what they think of CJ Stroud, because that's going to be the really interesting thing. It feels like a lot of people just watched the Georgia game and didn't watch much CJ this year, which happens.
Northwestern happened too, though. We got to remember.
It did, but I don't think people were posted up watching the Northwestern game. So it's kind of like a CJ Stroud type of buzz. Is there anything in the world that could talk you into Will Levis?
Probably not. No, I'm just really off on the whole. And I will admit my biases where they're there. So I'm in Atlanta right now, and watched a lot of SEC football this year. That's just what's on Saturdays. And I just never saw a Kentucky game where I said, wow, that's I feel like the great guys, they have their moments. And maybe I need to go back to 2021, because the Will Levis people, that's what they talk about. I do need to spend some more time there. But with the context of where the Texans are picking, I just cannot imagine someone topping the grade that I have on Bryce on the field. And you talk about the guy off the field. Landry, you got to go listen to his podcast from last year, by the way. The one that Cowherd posted, it's great. They're going to love the guy. He loves football. He's going to check the boxes. There's no nonsense with Bryce, and I kind of love it. With Will Levis, though, I think he would have to jump Stroud and Young. So it's not just that I would need to talk myself into him as a prospect. It's that he would have to get over those two guys. And for me,
what about AR? What about AR-15?
This would be the worst thing that could possibly happen for Anthony Richardson's career. I mean, he is a guy that he is a super project. You're talking about mechanics. You're talking about how he reads the field. You're talking about getting him up to speed with this playbook versus what he was doing at the NFL level. I cannot imagine throwing Anthony Richardson into this. I think it's somewhere where he needs to sit for an entire season and work on everything that isn't going to be about performing in live games, and then you can transition. I mean, if they take him at 12, I can see why. He has excellent tools. I think when it looks good compared to anyone in this class, it looks good. Like
he won the week one Heisman, no doubt. He was the week one Heisman winner.
I mean, I felt like I was back in 6th grade watching Cam Newton again, but that that did not pan out for the whole season. And especially with today's, like, how predicated the game is on passing the ball. We talk about holes of the other guys and where they need to progress. Anthony Richardson has dozens of questions that you need to answer and kind of bet on your coaching staff. And I'm not sure there's enough infrastructure here. I mean, do you think he could work in a place like Houston?
I don't know if he can work at all. Like if he has to play right away, like I think his ideal scenario would be falling to like 15 or 20 or something like that. I think he's kind of in a tough spot though, because I think what's going to happen is one of these teams, whether it's Carolina or Atlanta or something like that, I don't think he gets past them. And then, the expectations are just crazy to where, the guy might not be ready. And the other thing about it is I think there's like a Josh Allen impact where everybody now thinks that whether it's Will Levis, whether it's Anthony Richardson, hell, I heard Orlovsky compare Malik Willis to him last year. Like any prospect now who's a little bit raw, who like has like, any semblance of physical traits is all of a sudden now Josh Allen. And even Josh Allen was terrible in his first couple of years. I mean, he was not Josh Allen till, maybe year 2 or 3 or whatever. So I just don't, I'm not an AR-15 guy. I just not, especially at 2 and at 12. I'm not really down with that. I just don't think this is, I don't think he's going to find himself in a good situation with how stuff's lining up.
I mean, I try to tell people, Storm, what's up? I try to tell people, I mean, 2 of my favorite cliches that I love for sports. One, when people show you who they are, believe them. We saw an inaccurate passer who needs a lot of work. And 2, the exception is not the rule. And I think Josh Allen is absolutely the exception. I agree with you. People are quick to jump that Allen made the leap from, I mean, he was my 5th quarterback in that class back in 2018 because
everybody's. He might not even been 5 for some people.
He couldn't hit checkdowns. It was infuriating. It was okay. Like, I like quarterbacks who can throw it in between 3 guys with like a cannon of an arm, but I also like moving the chains and first downs and winning games. And for Richardson to make all the leaps that he needs to, I think he needs the right environment. And, Buffalo had, I think we've seen now, Brian Daboll is a brilliant offensive guy. We've talked about Daniel Jones on this. We've talked about Saquon Barkley in comparison to Bijan Robinson, just built an offense around those 2 guys. I think Josh Allen had the perfect landing spot in Houston. There's no reason to believe right now that we could offer those same things and that level of defense.
Joe says, just got to draft the right quarterback. And I guess, but sometimes he's not there. Like that's the problem is, and this is where draft talk drives me nuts. And I'm not talking about just you, Joe. I'm just talking about sometimes the way that we talk about the draft. We talk about it as if, sometimes like the GM just writes on a sheet of paper, give me a franchise left tackle. And we're arguing about that, like sometimes it's not there. Sometimes you go full drafts without a franchise quarterback. Sometimes there's not a corner. Sometimes there's not a good tackle, and you can find some guys later. So if, of course, like when we're having this discussion about, I don't want to take this quarterback at 2, or this guy's not worth it, or if Bryce is gone, I don't want any of these guys. It's not an argument over, well, I would rather have a really good pass rusher over a really good quarterback, because any GM, even the most hard-headed defensive-minded guy in the world, is going to say, okay, I'll take the quarterback if all things are equal. It's not, if the quarterback is not there, when you try to force it, that's where you find yourself in trouble. And I do feel that there's a little bit of Bryce movement now, though. Just, I don't know, on your timeline, does it seem like are
we talking nationally or locally?
Locally, I think CJ is getting a little momentum. Locally, I think the CJ crowd is increasing just a little bit.
I would say I see Bryce is gaining momentum nationally as we see the people who attend the Super Bowl and do national podcasts turn their attention towards the draft, and they're really putting on the film and saying, wow, he's fantastic. And I would agree. I see CJ momentum locally, which I wonder if that's just a response to the fact that we might not get Bryce. But I agree with you, because if you miss, I mean, you can't take a quarterback unless you're extremely confident that they're going to hit, especially in a class with Will Anderson, who had 34.5 sacks in 3 seasons. That doesn't happen in college. Or Jalen Carter, who I mean, talk about a game-wrecking defensive tackle, someone that, I mean, D'Amico Ryans could go and rebuild his entire scheme around. But if they don't love Stroud or they don't love Levis and Bryce is gone, I think that you can't force the pick. And that's why I'll circle back. I really do think that it's not impossible to see them trading up if they only have one guy with that rank, because giving Chicago the opportunity to still get the top guy on their board and additional top 100 picks that they had no business having because Nick Caserio let Brandon Cooks be active and some other guys that game. That's a win for them, and that's probably a win for us. So it's just going to be interesting to watch because they're in a bad spot. I mean, they're in a great spot. I love the number 2 pick, but
better.
They can't control their own destiny anymore, and they had that a month ago.
Yeah, and that's the problem, and that's really the cost. But if you have to trade up, you have to trade up. I think Chicago. The one thing that I'm very confident in, and maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they just think that stockpiling assets is more appealing than getting it. I don't see any way in hell that Eberflus doesn't fall in love with one of these guys. Like, especially a guy who is a defensive guy who had to trade 2 really, really good players as part of a rebuild. They feel good about Justin Fields. I just don't see any way where he doesn't fall in love and pound the table for Carter or Anderson, like one of those guys. And how far back are you going to be willing to trade and sacrifice that? Because Indianapolis might be the furthest back you go. I think Indianapolis, they might be comfortable staying at 4. I think Irsay might want to go up. They might be comfortable staying at 4, but it's a matter of how far back does Chicago want to go? How far do they want to take it? That's the one thing. Or they could be thinking about, we gave up a 2nd round pick for Chase Claypool and we got 15 catches or 14 catches, whatever for it. We need to get back in that 2nd round.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, when you talk about Indianapolis, the other thing that factors in, well, first, I agree with you.
We did get a 2nd for Roquan though, but
yeah. And that was, I mean, doesn't look great with how good he looked in Baltimore, but probably the right move for them. I think Eberflus is going to want one of those guys because they can change what you do on defense. And I might even argue he's going to have one that he prefers for how his scheme works between those 2 players. And the second thing, I mean, when we talk about Indianapolis trading up, and this is a big difference between trading from 2 and trading from 4, I think Houston can do it without a future 1st round pick. I do not think Indianapolis can make the move up without a future 1st. And if you're Indianapolis, I mean, that roster is deceptively bad, I would say. There's not a lot of great pieces there.
The O-line's not even good anymore.
Garbage. I mean, their best players are at left guard, running back, Stephon Gilmore. So corner's a valuable position.
Pittman's not bad. Pittman's a good
Forrest Buckner, interior defensive line. All of their good players are either old or at non-valuable positions. So if you are Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, are you comfortable trading away a 1st round pick that could very easily be a top 8 pick next year for a roster that is not anywhere ready to compete just to go get your quarterback when, you've got a guy that, I mean, one of the reasons you hired him is because what he did with Justin Herbert, what he did with Jalen Hurts, the success that he had when he was with Phillip Rivers, someone who's worked with a lot of different archetypes and can probably make it work with, I would say, any of the top 3 guys or even Anthony Richardson. So I agree. The market for trading with Chicago might not be as big as the national media wants to make it out to be, because do they want to move back and how much are people really willing to pay to move forward?
Yeah, it's really a matter of how far. The gold mine for teams is going to be if Atlanta or Carolina wants to move up, because they're right by each other. They've been competing. Those are the desperate squads, and that's where I'm to the point where if the Texans like whatever quarterback goes number 1 more than everyone else, do you trade with Carolina or do you trade with Atlanta? Because you've already had communication with those 2 teams. Arthur Smith, I think he's done a good job. The win-loss record doesn't really show it. He's kind of been dealt a crappy hand. But they're going to have to start winning, and he's definitely going to have to find his quarterback. And he's in a really, really tough spot where I don't know what quarterback's going to be there. There's going to be teams maybe willing to trade. If the Texans get to 2, if it's 2 and their quarterback's gone, I don't know what the price would be there. I mean, you're getting multiple ones for sure to move back to 8 or 9, and then you have 9 and 12. Is that something you consider? Because you're kind of sitting in a good spot there too.
So for me, when I look at the class, I would have a really hard time doing that after the season you endured, because your best value when you get back to pick 9 is probably taking an offensive tackle or you're taking a corner. And it's just not what this team needs. I mean, you can start reaching maybe for some of these, maybe you take a Miles Murphy if he's still there at 9, and, you get the third best defensive lineman in the class as an edge rusher. They really like him. But I think after the season that Houston just went through, they probably owe it to themselves to land one of these top guys, to land a Will Anderson, kind of someone who you hope becomes Myles Garrett in Cleveland, or you're talking about another J.J. Watt type, an edge rusher who can define your defense, or similarly with Jalen Carter, just a game-wrecking defensive tackle. It would be hard. I mean, the first would be great, but we have first-round picks, and what we need is elite players at positions of value and at positions that we don't have them. And it's just not a great – it's a great draft, I would say, in terms of top 100 value, especially on day 2. But when you talk about really elite guys in the class, I don't think there's a lot of them. And, I've heard other people say there might only be 16, 18 guys with first-round grades in this class. And I think there's a pretty steep drop-off between those elite first-round grades and the others. So I would have a hard time moving down to 9, unless, if they really gave you the farm, you always have to think about it. But
what do you think about this chess match going on with hey, wait for Caleb Williams or wait for Drake, and I'm hearing the Arch Manning. That's just ridiculous. Like, what am I supposed to do? Go into a coma for 3 years? I don't even. I would just see if Arch beats out Ewers coming back next year. Like, before we start even doing that, I just think it's nice to have multiple first round picks. Like, if you want to look at it next year, but like this whole, we're going to play chess. I mean, there's a good opportunity to win some games this next year. And like I don't think that's a good mindset to have. And I don't know what Caleb Williams is going to be in the NFL. And I know that Sean Payton has basically said he's like LeBron James or whatever, but that's just something I can't get down with. I felt gross enough having to root for the Indianapolis Colts to beat the Texans, and having to basically say, let's get that number 1 pick. I cannot go through another year of, hey, let's lose, let's trust the process, especially not in this league. Like, this isn't the NBA.
No, and I agree with you. First, whoever gets the number 1 pick next year, they're taking Caleb Williams, almost certainly. This is a guy who's kind of being talked about in the Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck realm. It might not matter if you have free first-round picks if you're not able to go get him. And then after that, I'm blank. Who's the guy from Carolina?
Drake.
Yeah, Drake May. Are you going to be able to even get him? That's a question mark. And when you talk about, look at the relative cost right now of what it would probably take to move up to go get the top quarterback in this class, which for me is Bryce Young. I have Bryce higher than Drake May. I think that Bryce played a lot better college football. He doesn't have May's frame or athleticism, no, but the things that he actually produced, I'm very confident that right now it looks like he would be a better NFL player. We'll see what kind of steps forward May takes. Let's see if he can beat a top 25 team. But, do you really want to pay 3 first-round picks a year from now to take Drake May when you could pay just an additional second rounder and go ahead and get a Bryce Young? And then that also brings in, do you want to start the D'Amico 10-year tanking? Do you want to there's so many questions and so many things that are going to happen between now and the 2024 NFL draft. And I think betting on those prospects who, this time 2 years ago, we were talking about Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell as future top 5 picks. Look what happened then. I don't think that'll happen to these guys, but that's just the uncertainty of trying to project drafts this far out, especially when you don't know where you're going to be picking, where your other firsts are going to be. I like the idea of Caleb Williams. If he was at the top of this draft, I'd be very comfortable taking him, but he's not. He's not available for Houston, and it's not something I would plan the future of my franchise around.
My biggest wish in this draft, I would go the first 3 picks. Like, my perfect combination is in any order: quarterback, wide receiver, running back. I want one of these like elite Gibbs type of guys, Bijan Robinson type of guys. That's my ideal. I think the focus should be on offense this year. Do you have like an ideal 3-piece formula in no particular order?
I think all my mock drafts are going to start with Bryce Young at 2 until I'm confident that we can't take him. He's my QB1. If it's not him, I am comfortable taking Stroud. I think he's a really good player. I think he'd play well in this offense. The next pick after that, we do need help at wide receiver. Right now, I think the only guys on the roster.
Boy, that free agent market is trash.
It's terrible. So I don't want to overpay anybody. People are asking me, what about DJ Chark? Do you want to pay DJ Chark $11 million? Because I don't. I'm not trying to use a third of our cap space on DJ Chark. So I would just take a guy at 12, even if it's going to be, he might be the 20th, the 22nd best guy in the class. Go ahead and take him at 12. So I would take a Jordan Addison, take a Smith Najigba. And then at 33, if Bijan Robinson made it there, I would absolutely take him. Because like I said, when you plug those 3 guys in, I know. So realistically, I mean, you could take Jahmyr Gibbs there, and I would be okay with that. I also think there's going to be some really good edge value at that point. Felix from Kansas State, I mean, he's a great player. Nolan Smith from Georgia. You could get that kind of guy just to give Lovey some pieces. And then at the end of the 3rd round, I'm starting to look at linebackers. I think there's a bunch. I mean, there's no elite linebacker in this class, so I think guys are going to fall. And I think you're going to kind of be able to pick your poison based on what traits D'Amico wants to attack. There should be some good players there. But I agree with you that the 2 first-round picks should go to offense because, I mean, a big part of the reason that we lost game, no one wants to say it, but we do not win only 3 games if Davis Mills is not the quarterback of this team. If Bryce Young's on this team, I think we win the Indianapolis game week 1. I think we probably beat Denver. I think we beat Chicago. I think we can win that Kansas City game. And then if you go another step, one of the big reasons that the defense just started to look so bad is they were on the field so much. When you keep going 3 and out, it's not sustainable. So even D'Amico, who we think is a better coach than Lovey, he's going to need to give his guys some time to rest. So I agree with you. Invest in the offense. At least, it needs to look respectable. I'm not expecting it to take a huge step to be, a top 10 offense all of a sudden, but it needs to be a top 20 unit under Bobby Slock if D'Amico wants any chance. And that kind of starts with playmakers and upgrading a quarterback.
Tad's bringing up tight ends. I agree. I think tight end, I could see like them trading into the back end of the 2nd or something like that. I think tight end is going to be something they value. I put together a list of, and go check out the video, subscribe, like all that stuff. The people that benefit most from like the coaching staff changes. I think Quitoriano could. I'm very intrigued to see what he looks like in this system. I think he's the only tight end right now that we know is going to be on the team. Blocking was supposed to be his strength. It looks like he can catch the ball a little bit better than maybe we anticipated. But I think they're going to have multiple tight ends. And there's some very, very intriguing names at the tight end list. And these guys could fall to there could be a situation where a tight end doesn't go in round 1. And we're talking about, with the 2nd pick, damn, should they take Kincaid? Should they take Mayer? Like, what should they do? Would they take another guy? Because the best draft that New England had, and it prolonged Tom Brady's career, was when they took Gronk, and they got Aaron Hernandez. I don't know, maybe Tom Brady plays till he's 45, but I think Gronk kind of helped prolong the career and kind of set, a different era of Brady ball, if you will. So I think in that 2nd, in that 3rd, we're going to see them take tight ends, and it wouldn't shock me to see them take a couple of tight ends in this draft. And just see what they can do, because you can steal some tight ends. You look at where some of the best tight ends in the league are drafted. It's not typically in the 1st round. Matter of fact, when you draft guys in the 1st round tight end, it doesn't work out more times than not, especially when it's really early. So I do think tight end is going to be something that happens as soon as day 2, and I could even see them like trading up with those multiple thirds and stuff and going and getting another one in the 2nd round. I think they're gonna love the tight ends in this draft. It's hard not to, really.
I don't think the value is there for a round 1 tight end, but it is a position that, I mean, we're terrible there right now. I agree. Quitoriano should improve here. He's a monster at blocking, and I think they're going to really value that just by how much he's going to be on the field. I would expect him to take a leap forward. And then it's a good class day too. A name you didn't mention, Washington from Georgia. I mean, he was behind Brock Bowers. I would love to see what he can actually do when he's featured, because that team, I mean, it was just an embarrassment of riches for Georgia this year on all fronts. But I mean, possibly nowhere more than watching Washington be the backup on that team to Washington.
6'7". I mean, just a massive human being. Looks like a creative player.
No, for real. It's like something that, your cousin would make in Madden. It's like, guys like that aren't real. And no, Washington's there and he was a backup. I don't know about Brevin Jordan. I don't
Yeah,
know how
Bruce is asking about
scheme.
Brevin. Here's what it is with Brevin Jordan this year, except that there's one different thing about it. If you just fell asleep at training camp, like let's say I went to training camp and I was ready, I was excited to cover training camp, and I was talking about Brevin Jordan, and then I fell asleep and I woke up 365 days later, it's the exact same conversation. Except the only thing is now he's not guaranteed a roster spot. It's kind of the same with Grenard. Like Grenard's in a contract year, but it was just, can he stay healthy? You see some stuff from him. Can he stay healthy? So like when it comes to Brevin, when it comes to Nico, when it comes to Grenard, like you're having the exact same conversations, except the difference between Nico and Grenard is I know they're going to be on the team. I know they're going to be on the roster. Brevin Jordan's kind of fighting for his NFL life right now to where you're saying the exact same types of things, but we could very well see a situation where Brevin's just not on the team and maybe not even in the league after this year. It's unfortunate, but that's just where it is. I like Brevin.
The difference between Brevin and those two guys is with Nico Collins and Grenard, I have seen moments where I'm like, oh, that's a really valuable NFL player. That was nice. For Nico, it's been route running and physicality. I say, oh, that's a number 2 receiver or number 3. I like that. I want that on my football team. With Grenard, he had a really nice 2021 season. Heck, he had a great final game against Indianapolis. Thanks for finally showing up. And with Brevin, we keep waiting. We keep talking about, I think he had a lot of pre-draft hype before that college football season, and then was a guy that fell. So it's always felt like more of a name than a player at this point. And I agree. Like if he didn't make the team, I don't think I'd be stunned.
Yeah. I don't know how, like, what's he fit? What's he going to do? Like in the system, like what is the ideal for Brevin? What's the attack in free agency? I don't think they're going to be overly aggressive. I think there's going to be some dry powder. I don't think there's going to be like the 1 year, nobody else wants this guy, so he's going to come in here type of thing. So I think they'll be shopping a little bit better. There's really nothing they can do at receiver. Maybe you want to get in the center mix. Maybe you like McGovern. Other than that, I think there's going to be some aggression somewhat, but I just don't expect them to be like massive spenders. I think there's going to be a little bit of dry powder too, to where you're looking ahead to next year.
Yeah, I would go ahead and overpay a center. That's one thing I would comfortably do, just going ahead and looking at the rookie class. And it's kind of twofold for me. One, a good center obviously going to improve how you run the ball. Obviously, your pass protections on the interior, we're not going to have to watch happen. Sometimes I felt like Davis Mills just didn't stand a chance how fast things were happening on the inside. But the second thing is, if you want to get the best out of Kenyon Green, and do not get me wrong, we need that investment to work out after taking him with the 15th pick. I would like stability for Kenyon. And if he is between a high value free agent center, whether that's McGovern or whether that's a Bradley Bozeman from Carolina and Laramie Tunsil, that's a very stable place. Those guys, you would expect them all to play 17 games at those positions, and he can learn to play with them. So in that aspect, I think I'd be okay to spend at center. Maybe you'll get a linebacker, because I think realistically, Christian Harris is the only guy from last year I'm really excited to see start again. Kirksey played that middle linebacker role that was super valuable in Lovey's defense. I don't think it's going to be the same with D'Amico. So if you can go get
unless you want a lot more Cashman snaps, Cashman
Cashman could play, but if you can get a starting quality linebacker, it's a position that's underpaid generally in the NFL. I don't want to pay any premier positions, because you're going to get like B- talent at an A price tag. Yes, I would definitely re-sign Okoronkwo, but I'm not paying receiver. I'm not paying edge rusher. It's a terrible free agent edge rushing class. I see a lot of people talk about Payne from Washington. I don't think
tagged or signed. He's getting tagged.
We're not going to pay him that much. Even if he made the market, I just can't see us shelling out that kind of money to him, and to even create that kind of cap space with the other needs that we have. I'll be curious to see if they re-sign Laramie Tunsil in the next few weeks to try to make that space. Obviously, Cap's been talking about that a lot. And
you think he's a scheme fit?
Tunsil?
Yeah.
I think he's scheme proof. He's just a damn good football player. He was the best left tackle in football this year. I feel bad for the guy that he got snubbed from All-Pro, but when he wants to be vicious in the run game, he can be. He is the best pass protecting offensive tackle in the league. I'd pay him. I mean, it's something stable. This team needs more elite talent. I would do it. Jesse Bates is a Wake Forest grad. I like him. He is young. I just think it'd be pricey. And like our secondary is the best part of our team. And for me, putting more money there, I mean, maybe you disagree with this, Landry. We're just talking about getting good football players, but our secondary, I think it's fine. There are just so many other needs that the cap space has to go to this year.
Yeah, I like the secondary. I actually think that's one of the things that they set out to do last year, and they did a really good job of improving the secondary. I am intrigued to see a couple of things. As far as like re-signing Okoronkwo, I agree. I do wonder, like, what does it look like when Grenard's out there too, like consistently? Like, does that kind of limit the production a little bit? So are we seeing, him kind of get more chances to shine because Grenard wasn't really out there? Also, I think in like an ideal world, I don't mean this as like disrespectful. I think the good organizations, the good franchises, they find Okoronkwo, excuse me. We'll just call him O squared. They find them, they find those guys every year. Like you have a guy come in and then you have a guy like have a career year and you just keep figuring it out. But the more bodies, the better. I do wonder like what it looks like when Grenard's out there. And I also wonder like, what does D'Amico Ryans think of Christian Kirksey? Because it's hard for me to imagine that he puts in the Christian Kirksey tape and just says, yeah, I want that guy to be one of my leaders of my football team. I know, God bless him. He's playing as hard as he can, but there's no, I just find it really hard to believe that someone like him puts the tape in and says, I really love Christian Kirksey. We got to bring him back.
No. And I will say that's one of the most encouraging parts of having D'Amico Ryans on the team. You talk about finding guys like Ogbo every year, is that there's a lower tier of free agent that we're probably not talking about right now that D'Amico Ryans will put on the film and say, okay, I can make that look a little different in my scheme. Like he can be a much more valuable contributor. I expect if there's anywhere where you can cut costs, it's going to be on the defense, because guys can reasonably be expected to grow and take leap forwards when you get a defensive coach of this caliber. And when you put together, I love what they've done with the staff. I'm glad that Unland's coming. I think Matt Burke is very familiar with what they want to do.
Was number one on your list, right?
I mean, he was okay. Okay, you're going to give me a hard time about that.
But, no. I was just saying you were talking about the D-line. I was like, are the defensive coordinators? I was like, Crumpy's got a power ranking of the defensive coordinators, and your guy got hired. Your number one got hired.
I mean, well, so what I wanted, I really thought there were two molds for the D'Amico defensive coordinator. It was either a really young, talented guy with ideas to bring, or it was a older guy who was familiar with the scheme and was going to help implement it. So for Burke, I liked Unland the best because I thought, okay, of all things, D'Amico's trying to learn how to be a head coach. And I think people underrate just how difficult that transition is from coordinator to head coach in terms of what your presence in the locker room means all of a sudden, the additional responsibilities in the front office that you're taking. I want things off D'Amico's plate. And I liked Unland in that, okay, he's worked under D'Amico for the last 2 years. He knows exactly the type, how he wants his players at every position to work. He knows what they're trying to accomplish on game days and when they're installing game plans. So when they got Unland, I don't care about the defensive coordinator hire anymore. And what I learned about Burke, which I did not know before, was that, I mean, they really come from that same Jim Schwartz system about how their defensive line is going to play. But all this to say, there's a wealth of experience, and really the strength of the coaching staff looks like it's on defense right now. So you can cut costs at linebacker and defensive line, I think. And that's part of why I don't feel a huge pressure to take an elite talent at edge rusher when the quarterback is there right now, because I expect there to be some day 2, some day 3 guys that D'Amico makes look really good. And D'Amico can't do that with a quarterback. That's just not who he is.
I also think the ceiling with Harris, Petrie, and Stingley is just like so high with D'Amico that you naturally have not just like, oh, this guy plays better. Like it could be, I mean, we could be talking about Pro Bowl caliber player in Jalen Petrie sooner rather than later. A clear CB1 in Derek Stingley, and I think Christian Harris benefits the most. I think if Christian Harris is healthy, I think Christian Harris benefits the most. So I just think as far as like high ceiling, those guys just go up significantly. I like the staff because it's younger. I like the fact that it's young. And I saw Patrick Storm talking. I don't know who he was talking with, but he was going back and forth about, how D'Amico said he wants a diverse background of coaches, like as far as like their philosophies and their experience. And I guess he was talking about someone was saying, well, he's hired all these guys from San Francisco. Two things about that. Number one, they're guys who've coached in other places too, and they have a lot of experience. So I don't think that's too big of a deal. Second of all, like I know that we have like a complex here about copying because we've tried to copy the Patriot way. The thing about copying the Patriot way is that the Patriot way hasn't been able to be duplicated anywhere outside of New England, really. So it doesn't work when you try to copy that. The Shanahan, all that like way, like the whatever you want to call it, Kubiak, like whatever you want to call it,
everywhere.
it's all around the league. So if you are copying that, that's a good thing to copy because it works all over, like everywhere you look, every coast, every division, like you can see it. You can see it working. So I have no issue with that. I have some people, and McLean said this. I think Clint Sterner said this today on Sports Radio 610. They want like a coach that has had head coaching experience. I think Cole Thompson said it too. Shout out to him. Why? Like I understand like in a like the
perfect world, maybe.
Well, I mean, but what for? Like if he can call defense like Wade Phillips or Mike Pettin, then sure. I know that LaFleur and McVay had that, but Shanahan didn't have that, and neither did Zach Taylor. So I mean, D'Amico has a cell phone. Gary Kubiak told us he's already talked to him. So what does they need like a former head coach for? Like, do they need to be babysat?
I guess it would just be to have someone in the building that's been through what D'Amico. I mean, D'Amico's going to be a really young head coach, and he is a first-time head coach. So, I mean, I think it's the idea of having experience and guys who can help take things off his plate. And right now, I think we've kind of satisfied the criteria of there are guys on the staff that we expect to make his life easier. But now it's transitioning to, does he really have anyone who's been through the same experiences that he's going to go through? Because it is a lot of things to juggle. I mean, I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago, and they talked about when you become the head coach, everything you say in the locker room becomes the most important thing that player heard that week. It takes on a different responsibility of what your input actually means to how you're scouting players on other teams and how you're scouting the prospects. You have to communicate with ownership. I think there's a lot more than just D'Amico's not just going to come in, be given the title of head coach and get to run the defense. There's some other things. And I think as he kind of hits those hurdles, even though I think he's incredibly well equipped for it, I think those sentiments kind of come from, we want him to be in the best position to succeed. I don't care if they get someone who's been a head coach or not. I agree with you. I think that moment's passed. I think if you were going to do that, it probably needed to be someone at coordinator. And he's kind of taken he's brought familiarity from San Francisco. And to me, that's the second best thing. When people say, why are we trying to be San Francisco East or South? I say, well, do you want D'Amico to do this by himself? Do you think he's Superman? Do you think he's the greatest thing that's ever happened to coaching? Because he's going to need help. And for me, I'm excited that he's in a position to succeed by having those guys.
M. Ali is asking, should we trade for a number one wide receiver like the Eagles did for A.J. Brown? Here's my thing with that. You don't make moves like that until you're in position to where you're a wide receiver away, because even before the Eagles did that, they drafted Rager over Justin Jefferson, not good. And they traded up and drafted Devontae Smith at, I believe it was 10 overall. So you got to get your young receivers and stuff like that. And then we can start talking about, trading first rounders for stuff. But with where the Texans are at this point, trading first rounders for especially guys that you're going to have to pay a lot, it's counterproductive. You're right there in that 10 range, 10, 12 range where you evaluate your receivers. Hopefully you find a guy like Devontae Smith and then you figure it out. So I don't think you should make a move like that right now.
And the biggest thing for me would be you have to know that your quarterback is in a position to make that contract worth it. I mean, I think there were questions about Jalen Hurts, but we got to remember the Philadelphia Eagles made the playoffs last season. I mean, they got worked by Tampa Bay, but what we'd seen already under Sirianni just a year ago was that, okay, he builds an offense very well that can take advantage of the talent that it has. I mean, I think Hurts was very limited as a passer in 2021, and he just built something that said, we will overwhelm you with the run game. and Devontae Smith kind of flashed as, oh, he's going to be a really, at worst, he's going to be a really good number 2. At best, he looks like a 1. And they said, okay, we can take a step forward. And if Hurts can't do it, the rest of the teams, I don't think Houston has any of those pieces in place. This is not a playoff team. This is a 3-13-1 team. I would hope that maybe next year around this time when, Tampa Bay is going to be looking to move off Godwin and Evans as they probably have to start their rebuild. And maybe we're talking about year 2, Bryce Young, year 2, CJ Stroud, then you're in a position to do that. But right now, I would agree with you, no. And I also don't think, if you look at the guys who are talking about possibly being traded, of course, more names could come up. They did last year. There's no one on the market that I'm itching to go get.
No, not this year. What do you think the Cooks value is going to be? Is it going to be somewhere between that second round pick that was being talked about last year at the deadline and the 5th that Amari Cooper went for? Could they find a way to get it to, or is he going to have to change the money? Because I don't think Brandon Cooks plays again. I know that it's a more appealing place right now than it was. He doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild, and I quite frankly think they should just move on based on the pettiness. What is that value going to be?
If he wanted to be here, I would be okay with keeping him. I know that's not a popular opinion, but just because you can't really cleanly get off his salary, they gave him a deal that it's going to hurt no matter what. My value kind of changes depending on whether they wait to trade him till after the draft, or if they do it before. If it's before the draft, they're going to need to eat some additional money. And I think maybe you could get a 3rd round pick, maybe another day 3 pick with that. If they wait until after the draft and they want to do something, if we think about when we traded Bradley Roby to the Saints, and they got a valuable number 2 corner late in the season after players weren't available, and they kind of thought that was their last need. I think you could get a 2 for Brandon if you waited until June. But do you want more picks for this draft? Do you want to capitalize on the value while that's there? Do you want – it wouldn't be much. It's still $10 million, even if you're taking a nice dead cap hit. Do you want that for this free agency? So for me, if I'm Nick, I'm waiting until after the draft and seeing who needs a receiver. And I think when the market's a little smaller than it is right now, they could probably get most of that value that they turned away from Dallas.
I don't think we see Brandon Cooks here again. It's not the way that went down, the way it was handled. It's just not going to happen.
You don't like the tweets, the count me out song that he tweeted?
I don't like the tweets. I don't like the reason that he got upset. I think that's a little bit weird to me. He doesn't
want to be here, and that's fine. Yeah. It was a dumb reason to want to be here if it was for Jack Easterby. He had to know this was going to be a terrible football team. It was optimistic.
He told us. I was right there. I talked to him. He was all in on this rebuild.
I don't get it. And, I'm never going to blame a guy for getting paid. Like, it's their job. Like in any of our professions, if we could sign a contract that was that favorable to us when we were never going to get it on the open market, I would do the same. But it is kind of surprising how he's handled this, especially when he was made out to be. If we even go to last August, he was he was the best player at training camp by a mile. And we're talking about, oh, this is the professional. This is the face of the franchise. Like, he's kind of guiding the young guys through.
This is the buy-in.
It took 2.5 months for him to say, I hate this organization. I don't want to be playing. It's been I'm not going to call it unprecedented. I'm sure this happens all the time. But just in terms of where I expected his Texans arc to end, maybe we shouldn't be surprised because this is what's happened on every other team that he's played for. But it's ugly right now.
It's really ugly. With him, and it's really ugly at the receiver position, quite frankly, because I don't know what to expect from Mechie. I don't know what to expect from Nico. So it's an ugly receiver position.
We're drafting.
If this were next year's draft, I think there would be a draft Harrison at number 2 dialogue. I think it would be a very, very strong dialogue.
I think it would be hard to do with this class of quarterbacks, but he'll be up there. He's a top 5 pick next year. I agree that he would be. It would be CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and then there would be people in the Harrison crowd. But yeah, they got to get a wide receiver. In my latest mock draft on the Texans Wire, y'all go out and read that. I'm pretty proud of this one. I think we could trade
Texans Wire.
Got to plug the Texans Wire where possible.
It really is the best. It really is some of the best. I said it before you were coming on. It really is some of the best, like, substance Texans reading. I'd put it against any of the other major outlets, like, as far as reading, like, good information and stuff like that. I would put it right up there.
Thank you.
For sure.
We appreciate that. In my latest mock, I think you could trade down a few spots and still get a guy like Smith-Njigba or Addison, because like we said, the player value is not there, or the player evaluation is not there. Houston's going to have the draft, because I agree. We're in some real trouble if we trade Brandon Cooks, which we think is inevitable, and we're not going to sign anyone in free agency, which I think is quite possible with the price tag some of these guys are commanding.
Yeah, wide receiver might be rough. It might be. That's why you need the running backs. Make up for it with the running backs. Give me 2. Give me Bijan. Give me Vaughn too. Hell, if A-Chain falls to, just give me 3. Just give me an array of running backs. Give me a good running back room.
You're just ready to go against stacked boxes.
That's what I'm ready for.
9 in the box.
That's it. Crump, I appreciate you, man, very much. Tell the people where they can find your work, where they can follow you on social media, all that type of stuff.
Absolutely. Again, guys, my name's John. I'm the lead analyst on the Texans Wire. You can give me a follow on Twitter at John H. Crumpler. I put a lot of my thoughts there. All my articles go there. And make sure you're reading what we're doing over at the Texans Wire. We're proud of the content we're putting out this offseason, and we think it's going to be a good one for Texans fans.
We had a sweet Valentine's message yesterday, too.
Oh, yeah.
Did not go unnoticed.
We got to give some love to Mackenzie. I told her. She's like, well, I put it on Instagram, too, but I was like, Mac, like 10,000 people will see this. Like, you got to let me tweet about you. And she said, fine. So
there you go. Score points. All right. Appreciate you. We'll have to do it again, my friend. I appreciate you. Keep doing what you do. Keep localizing. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Landry.
All right. There you go. The great John Crumpler here in the locker room. Some good information there. Some good strategy. Again, just kind of the way about it. He's a Bryce Young guy. He's a Bryce Young guy. He's okay with going running back. And in free agency, got to get the center and then figure some stuff out. Follow him out at John H. Crumpler. Subscribe and like here as well. Digital Game is blowing up. #1 source for daily Texans digital content. Appreciate everyone for coming through. We had a little technical thing at the beginning. I know what it was. It was my fault. I'm an idiot. But we got it fixed, and we actually kept trucking with it. Some of y'all didn't even notice, but we kept trucking with it, got it fixed. And tomorrow in the Loop, Sports Radio 610, 10 to 2. We got a lot to get into there. We're going to talk about Deshaun Watson versus DeMeco Ryans. When do you want to see that? Also got the video on here, power ranking the dream matchups for the beginning of the DeMeco Ryans era. And on top of the other videos, go back and like those if you don't mind. It's some sort of algorithm crap that I have to bring up. But no matter what happens, appreciate everyone for coming through. We're going to go live probably a couple times a week moving forward. We'll have a daily video, and I appreciate all of you. No matter what happens, though, when it comes to this Texans stuff, we are all in this together. Have a good one.